So I hope you all had a good relaxing break. Welcome to the investment panel, the place where the money meets, of course, very important. I'm very glad that you joined us today. The reason why we put this panel together is because, of course, the question, how do we fund external innovation, is a very important one. And as we all know, innovation has many challenges like innovation theater, which is a bit of a corporate disease that is pretty widespread. We have sometimes strategic goals versus financial goals. We have the challenge how to make innovation also transactionable for a corporate so that people actually can do something with technology that is being developed. So we have an awesome panel here. I will briefly introduce the colleagues, and then we have like 4 rounds of questions that we will dive into, where we will cover a number of interesting and relevant aspects. So if you look to the financial firepower of this panel, it's around €500 million of money in the fire currently, so already spent or to be spent over the next years. And we have 3 corporates, strategic investors on this panel. And I would like to introduce Harry. He's head of external innovation and ventures at Schneider Electric. He's based in Silicon Valley. Then we have Dr. Briggs to the left or the right from your point of view. He's general manager of future energy from Origin Energy. He's also based in Silicon Valley. And last but not least, you already met Thomas. He's not based in Silicon Valley, but based in Germany, which is also great and fantastic. And my name is Florian. I'm doing strategic partnerships on behalf of innogy in Silicon Valley since around 4.5 years. Sometimes they include an investment component, sometimes not. And actually, together with Talal and Intertrust, we articulated and started the data-driven energy business model initiative. So what we will try to do in this panel is to explore the 3 areas, the why and the what and the how of external innovation, and also the investment side of it, and what challenges and opportunities the colleagues here are facing. So let me start with the first round of questions, and these are like a bit personal questions, so we get to know you guys a little bit better. And I would like to start with Harry. He joined Schneider 1 year and 8 months ago, I think, roughly. How challenging is it for you to lead external innovation for a global equipment company, a leading global equipment company like Schneider?
Thank you, Florian. Can you hear me like that, or do I need the microphone?
Microphone, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the question. It is not very easy, even though the company made the decision that we have to embrace innovation from outside, that breakthrough innovation rarely comes from inside. Even though the top management has that conscience, the DNA of a large industrial company is very different from what you need for innovation. Innovation, you need to have a long-term commitment. You need to accept a high tolerance of failure. Vinod Khosla said, if I don't lose all my money, 80% of my investments, I'm not taking enough risk. And in large companies, it's about mitigating risk. Here it's about embracing risk. So when the rubber meets the road, when I tell them, look, we need to do this, we need to do that, it's sometimes difficult for Schneider to take those steps. That's why when we created Schneider Electric Ventures, one very important principle was that we had to have some independence, to have thinkers that can think outside of the box, and that maybe the top management wouldn't understand why we're doing some investment today, but maybe 3-4 years down the road, we say, oh my God, I'm so glad you invested in that company. And that was a difficult decision for them to take, but now it has been taken and is working quite well.
Well, that sounds pretty familiar what you're saying. Moving on to Cameron, you moved from Sydney to Silicon Valley around 2 years ago. Please explain to us, why did you move to Silicon Valley, and if it was a good move for you so far?
Thank you. So I think the first step in solving a problem is admitting you have one. And a couple of years ago, when we embarked on this whole exercise of what are we going to do, how are we going to change our company, I think as Harry pointed out, the first and most fundamental thing you came to realize is that we couldn't solve this problem by ourselves. And that sounds simple, it sounds obvious in hindsight, but for energy companies who traditionally hound themselves in spreadsheets and internalize everything, that's a really big step. And so for us, it was really about embracing the fact that we couldn't do it by ourselves, we didn't know everything, and we had to work with people that we hadn't done before. So we took the step of not just looking outside of our building, looking outside of our state, but actually looking outside of our country. So I took the step of moving over to Silicon Valley completely to change my perspectives, to change my ideas, and to every extent possible change the thinking process, the strategic insights that we had for our company. And so for me, it's been interesting living in the US, but it's been fantastic professionally just to challenge yourself with people who look at problems in a fundamentally different way.
Thank you. Thomas, your external innovation journey now lasts for a couple of years, and we had the great pleasure to embark on this journey more or less at the same time. What were your lowlights during this period, and also what were your highlights?
I mean, people tend to say that innovation is a meandering path, and everyone knows this and acknowledges this, but if you are on this meandering route, which means you go through ups and downs as a business model, it can be a really painful and on the other side, very exciting process. We had the big chance to being given space and resources and funding to try out things. We were given the opportunity to make failures, and God knows we did. I mean, a lot of went wrong in the early days, and these, let's say, failures and shortcomings, they were really painful and costly. So these are the downsides of this journey. The highlights of this journey was when there was a moment in time, and I cannot identify exactly when that was, but when we traveled around all the locations where we are in the ecosystems, where we are doing innovation in Silicon Valley, in Tel Aviv, in London, and in Berlin, and we realized that we have, let's say, created self-organizing, self-running organisms who are deeply embedded in those ecosystems, who can deliver their value to the company, to the shareholder. That was absolutely amazing. Yeah? And that was a moment in time where I thought, that's how innovation can look like and should look like, and that was one of the greatest emotions in my professional career.
Thank you for sharing that. Harry, when we met the first time in Silicon Valley, you told me that you had a dinner with your CFO, and you told your CFO that all the money he gave you will be gone and will be lost, to frame his mental model in a correct way. I hope you haven't not succeeded yet, and you have many more years to achieve that goal, to burn all the money. Joking aside, can you explain to us a little bit what's your strategy for external innovation is, and how does your toolbox look like? What do you actually do?
Okay, thank you for that. And just to emphasize this conversation, when Johan was talking about the embrace, our CFO wanted to be in the investment committee that decides on the investments, and I said, no, Emmanuel, you are brilliant as a CFO, but with your mental framework, if you're in the investment committee, we will take all the wrong decisions. This is not about managing risk, it's about taking risk. So I push him aside gently. Then 1 year later, I'm educating them how it works. He was telling me, yes, Harry, I've understood. You will lose all our money sometimes. No, Emmanuel. I'm telling you, I'm going to lose all our money most of the time. And he's looking at me like, oh my God, what is this guy telling me? But that's how venture works. So it's been an education process for the company. We have made a lot of progress. It's working really well. What do we do? What is our goal and what do we do? We have 3 goals. Number 1 is build an ecosystem of partners that help us complement our offer, things that we don't have in the house. One example, we invested in the leading cybersecurity company called Clarity, because Schneider manages factories, manages buildings, but we don't have a cybersecurity solution. Now we go with our investment partner, Clarity, together to our customers, and we say, now we have a cybersecurity solution you can put on top of the Schneider software, and your factory is secure. So that is a good example of that. Second objective is to build new growth engines for the company. The divisions and the businesses we don't have today that we want to have in the future. Companies we invest in or we create that we will end up acquiring, and then there will be growth engines for Schneider. And the third one is access to markets. The way we've been selling our circuit breakers and our technology has not changed in 60 years. But what Amazon did for retail can happen in our market as well. So we want to be disruptive and try out secretly some ways to have direct access to the contractors, to the electricians, so that we keep our access to market. And we don't have an Amazon between us and them that can squeeze our margins and our market share. So those are the three objectives. To achieve these three objectives, we have three practices. One is the incubation practice. We look at 200 ideas a year. We select 10 to work on really closely. And what I mean really closely is that we create a team that focuses for 3 to 6 months full-time on developing this idea, and at the end of which they come to us and pitch, fund me, I have a great business plan, or they say, this is not for us, we stop, because Apple did it already, or there's a reason. So we are launching 5 new businesses per year that we create from scratch that have a strategic fit with Schneider. The second, we have investments. We have a fund of funds. We have direct investments. We're stage agnostic. We can make $100,000 up to 10 million euro is decided by me and my team directly, no interference. Above a 10 million euro check, I have to go back to the CEO of the company, but it's quite a streamlined process. And the third practice is partnerships. Once we have a portfolio company, we partner with them to support them, to help them to grow and to have an unfair advantage to make it. And also for Schneider to be the channel and the partner of choice when this company is growing. So incubation, investments, and partnerships.
Thank you very much. That also sounds pretty familiar to a lot of people in the room here, I assume. Cameron, let's talk a little bit about product. The background is because Cameron is a very, very strong enthusiast for products, developing products, solutions that are very sophisticated. Not so much the whole investment topic. Nevertheless, you also did some investments in the past, and probably you will do some in the future. Give us an idea, why do you invest in these companies, startups or technology companies? And how does it help you to deliver products?
Okay, I might just broaden the definition of investment. So when we sit here and we think to ourselves, we have a challenge that the future is going to look very different to what it looks like today. And so if you go into that framework and you say, well, how do I get from where I am right now to where I need to be? You have to make an investment decision, both in terms of the people, in time, and in terms of dollars that's going to get you there. And so what we do is we start off and say, from an investment framework, how long are we going to take? How many people do we want to deploy at this? And how might we deploy some capital in terms of getting there? So in terms of the arsenal and things that we can do, we don't have the answers within, we look outside. And they might be conversations with people, it might be partnering, it might be co-developing, it might be licensing, majority investment. So there's a number of tools that we have in terms of how we engage with companies. So if we find a company that really has something that's going to be useful to our ecosystem, it's not a financial investment, it's very strategic at its heart, that's developing a product or service that we think integrates deeply into what we want to do and where we want to be, we'll work very closely with that company. And I think, as Harry said before, we don't invest financially, but what we do is we identify those companies, and in Silicon Valley, obviously, dollars are the currency that matters, the fuel that fires things. We very carefully target how we might deploy capital from an investment point of view. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One is to get the attention of the startup. Obviously, if you become an investor, they pay more attention to you. Secondly, if you give them capital, it gives them the fuel to do things for you, which is ultimately what you want to do. And thirdly, that you really nurture the idea they have and take it from something that may be not quite, a little bit nascent, and you sit with them, you help them understand what impact it can make to your market, you work with them, you deploy it, and you give them the vision and the channel so that they can grow, and as they scale, it becomes integral to what you do. So it's really trying to, as much as we can, align our interests with what the startup is doing so that you develop actual products and services that, when they're successful, will really integrate into what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. So Steve asked during the CEO panel the question around partnerships, and the capability to partner. And Mr. Tyson said rightfully that sometimes big companies are not so good in partnering with small companies because of the decision cycle and the strategic view they have. And I think that is a well understood problem. Maybe turning it around a little bit, Cameron, what are the frustrations that you have when you work with startup companies?
Startup companies are amazing in terms of the inspiration, their insight, and their laser focus, which is really the positive why you want to work there. They're not encumbered with traditional or legacy decisions. So they're always looking to the future. So I think my frustrations are that entrepreneurs are always very enthusiastic about what they can really achieve, and the challenging how realistic that might be, when they can achieve things, how long it's going to take. And I think the other thing is that with startups, because of their nimbleness, the flip side to that is often they're undercapitalized in terms of meeting and achieving what you want to do. So it's always a fine balance between finding companies that are sufficiently nimble to meet your needs, but making sure that they're sufficiently capitalized to last, to be with you, to last through the sales cycle that it takes with an energy company.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add from you guys to this question?
Well, yes. I mean, we are in the Innovation Hub. We see roughly 2,000 to 3,000 startups per year, and we have 4 distinct focus areas, which, in our point of view, represent the future of energy. When we're making decision in favor to investment, it's beyond the question, does it fit into our focus area, into our strategic focus? Always 3 things. Is it a great product? Is it a great market? And is it a great team? And these 3 aspects, they deviate as of the maturity of the startup. In the very beginning, the team is very, very important. You do not concentrate too much about is it the best product in the world, because they will, if you are in a seed stage, you will repivot anyhow. But is this guy or this lady or this person capable to bring the startup into the growth phase? And asking for frustrations, if you do mismatches there, that can be extremely frustrating. I mean, we also had the founders who call you, we just did the numbers and turns out we are running out of money in 3 weeks, can you help us? That sucks, right?
Does it sound familiar?
Yes, but I think the biggest problem is that, startups live by the motto, fake it before you make it. They overrepresent what they are capable to do, like Cameron said. But the thing is our role as an innovation link with our company to put those startups together with the mothership at the right time. If we do it too early and they're not ready, the startup will say, why did you bring me this? They're not ready. Their solution is not there. It has a lot of bugs. It has compliance problems. It has security problems. And then if we do it 2 times, they will not pay attention to us anymore. So it's very important to press the startup to have a solution that we can take and that we can really run with, to have some early successes, and you create a virtuous circle. And it is our role as the filter to know when is the right time to do that.
You talked about successes. I mean, at the end of the day, Cameron, how does success look like for you in this whole undertaking?
I think for us, it has to be the strategic impact. I think if we invest in a company and the valuation grows 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 time, that's fantastic. But the reality is, if you invest single-digit millions in a company and it has 10 times growth, it's tremendous if you want to walk around Silicon Valley being a venture capitalist. But in terms of a big organization, it doesn't really move the needle. So for us, the real metric that matters is how much impact it makes. Does it create revenue? Does it create better customer experiences, more diversity in terms of your earnings? So it's really trying to be very disciplined around making sure that the strategic impact is understood and hopefully measured when you in fact see success.
Maybe building on that, Thomas, you have built over the last 4 years a pretty substantial portfolio of companies, some of them with a very strong strategic story and link into the business, some maybe with a little bit lesser link. How do you successfully balance the potential conflict between strategic impact, financial impact, license to operate? Not every CFO appreciates the message that when you come and ask and please give me money, that the message is, well, be prepared that most of it will be gone. So how do you do that? How do you manage that?
So I don't see a contradiction in that. Maybe we have a little bit more technocratic view on that, but our KPI set stands on 2 legs generally. So we want to see the strategic impact. We always encourage our colleagues and especially my colleagues in the core business to connect with the startup, and we have quite powerful platforms to make that happen. But we see, let's say, a top-notch VC-like financial KPI set as equally important. Not so much because of its enormous contribution to the bottom line of the company, but more as a sanitary check. Yeah. At the end of the day, what matters, a startup and an idea is successful if it's successful in the market. And if a startup makes it into the next round, if you can attract other co-investors, and if they do their numbers right, that is, for us, equally important than, let's say, the amazing POCs and the amazing joint projects they do with our core business.
Mm-hmm. I would like to move now a little bit from maybe one level up to your strategies behind the external innovation, and would like to talk a little bit about how you articulated your strategies and how you implement them, and to which extent this is important and relevant. And I would like to start with Thomas, because actually this conference is labeled Data-Driven Business Model or Data-Driven Energy Business Model, which is a label that we developed around 3.5 years ago, and we articulated very explicitly a strategy. So what you normally do is you write a strategy paper, you put it in front of the board, and you ask for endorsement. And luckily, in our case, it worked nicely. So the board endorsed the strategy, and then, of course, immediately asked, so it's nice to have a strategy, but how are you going to implement? Can you explain to us a little bit why this was done, why the strategy was articulated, and how this has helped you so far in the innovation efforts? And I will ask also the other colleagues to elaborate a little bit on this.
Well, I mean, the first sets of strategy in the Innovation Hub root back into a time where we were still called RWE and where we were still active throughout the whole value chain, from digging and mining lignite to doing doing business, right? So we have been more a conglomerate in, let's say, at the verge of let's say, separation along shareholders and customer interests at the end of the day. In those times, we thought we have to take one step back and articulate from the distance what matters for energy in, let's say, 10 to 15 years from now. Not what products we can sell to our customers in 10 to 15 years, but how does the energy world look like in 10 to 15 years? And by doing so, we defined our so-called lighthouses, which is, for example, disruptive digital, which is mostly happening in the Silicon Valley. It's a group of young colleagues who basically are on a mission. Think 5 years from now, all utilities are dead. What happens? What are the attackers which have the potential to kill us? And let it be us to find them first. It is stuff like machine economy, all this blockchain stuff, which in our point of view really matters. And one of that was certainly driven by the idea in future every electron comes along with a bit of information. In future, energy will be one vertical amongst others, and our customer relationship will, to mutual benefit, not create value by sending electrons there and taking a margin of it, but let's say reaping all the levers we have to enhance value for customers and for us. And the data, information play an enormous role in this for various reasons. We talked about a lot and will today, so that became a cornerstone in our strategy. You see, when the buzzword strategy is coming, I can't stop talking, but I cut me off now myself.
Cameron, data-driven business model. I remember that when you hit the valley, you told me that in your company there are certain stakeholders which have the more cowbell approach. This is only something that people that live in the United States understand. So explain a little bit. I mean, what was the situation at the time around more cowbell, and how did you end up with data-driven business model and somehow finding a strategy around that?
So if you think where we started, and we're amongst close friends here, so I can share it. For the first year, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. We were given a mandate. Our board members would sit there and they'd read newspapers about the demise of the electricity retailing sector, and it would really concern them. And fear is a tremendous motivator. And so with that, they said, well, this has to be done, it has to be done well, and it has to be done by a group that's separated and given some time. So we were lucky that we were given a mandate. The board said, go away and figure out what you're going to do. We'll give you some time. Give us a monthly report, but we'll give you time. And so we went away, and in the first year of what we did, I think rather than having a strategy, we've got lots of strategy, lots of PowerPoints, we literally went out there and looked at thousands of opportunities. Because if you ever want a big company to make a decision, the easiest way is to stick a transaction in front of it. It crystallizes the mind, it catalyzes people around something to say, will I do this or won't I do this? And the important part about that is if it's yes, great. But if it's not, it really encourages the conversation, if not, why not? And if it's not this, what would you say yes to? So over the course of, I guess, the initial 12 months, we really honed what we thought was not only where the industry would go, but perhaps even the more difficult step is what role would we play, what would we get good at, and what would we need other people to get at? And so through that journey, we really started honing, and our directors sort of calling it, it's like watching a movie that gets sharper and sharper and sharper into focus through each year in terms of we develop this. So getting into data-driven business models was not a step function. It was a long, slow change. It was many arguments over many nights with Florian, helping me hone and helping me articulate what we thought it was going to do. And seeing that you really need to develop a robust path of not only what your business will be, but how you're going to get there. Because no one really knows, and how you're going to get there and at which velocity, because you really have the decision as a company, how hard do you put your foot on the accelerator? If you go too hard, you overinvest, you get ahead of the market, and you can end up being stranded because you've made wrong decisions. And if you go too slow, you end up having, well, opportunity cost or not being ready. And so for us, it was about understanding what we wanted to do, which area we wanted to get into, but also how fast that we wanted to deploy our resources in getting there. And I think through that process, really understanding that, you know, what do utilities companies have and what do they have in the future? I think they have customers. I think they have a fundamental trust base, as we heard about before. And I think, at least for us, we have fundamental skills at dealing and handling with complexity. And if you really think to yourself, okay, in an analog world, that's about supply and demand for electrons, but in a digital world, that's about applying that mentality to the complexity of digital problems. And if you can bring that skill and you can harness it, then it really does give you a path that's actually believable and sustainable.
Great. Harry, you are the non-utility. on the panel. And I have two questions for you. The first question is your message. What's your message to utilities? Because you told me during the coffee break I have like some burning questions for the utility community here. So that's the first question. What is it you want to tell us? And the second question is, because you're more from the equipment space, what's the Schneider strategy around external innovation there? So a little bit content. So which areas are you looking for? And do you have a data-driven business model strategy?
Okay, thank you for that. So as these two questions, I might speak more than a couple of minutes, but I start with the second question. We see the same type of trends that you see. We see distributed generation and consumption. It's a big trend that is new. We see the EV charging infrastructure that is going to put a strain on the grid and demands. That is very powerful. We see the advent of DC power supply. That hasn't happened, but it's going to happen now. We see solid-state circuit breakers that will completely disrupt the mechanical ones that we use. I'm talking now as an industrial provider. But we see those trends, and those are happening. And we have an investment-driven strategy. How do you say that? Investment strategy that is driven by themes that we see. So we see those things happening. Now, one message that I wanted to pass you here, because you are our dear customers as the utilities, is that I'm very glad you're having these conversations, because disruption is coming to this industry. Things are not going to be in 20 years the way they are today, and you know that. But you have an opportunity to change and embrace that change and benefit from it. The pace of change will not be as fast as some of the paranoid people think, but it's going to be slow, and then it's going to hit an inflection curve, and then it's going to be really, really fast. So you have time to leverage the assets that you have, your cash flow generation, your trust to customers, your access to the final customer, to invest in these new business models. That's the first message I wanted to pass. The second one is that you are very unlikely to succeed doing this internally. You need to embrace external innovation, create incubation projects, invest in startups that will do it on the side, and observe what is happening. And once you see something that is taking off, you double in your winners and you invest more on that, and you eventually acquire some of these companies. If you try to do it internally, I mean, there is no reason why Marriott couldn't have invented an Airbnb, but they didn't. There is no reason why Blockbuster couldn't have invented Netflix, but they didn't. There is no reason why Citibank couldn't have invented Lending Club, but they didn't. Big companies do not have a challenge to innovate in big disruptive things. And we are in a disruptive period of our industry. Therefore, plant seeds outside, observe, be clever, don't be afraid of the not invented here, and jump in at the right time with your resources. Now, I think the CEO of E.ON said something very, very important that applies both to the energy and to the digital thing. These are only tools. Everybody talks about data and digital. It's a reality, it's a possibility, but it's a tool. For what do you want digital? There has to be an application, a reason, a value creation application that you use that for. That is very important. So we need to move in this room from focusing on the assets and regulation that was our core differentiator before, to focusing on the customers. What can we create from them with these tools that give some value? And can you imagine that maybe in the future, you do not charge or pay for electrons, but you charge for lighting, you charge for cooling and heating, you charge for security in the home. You're charging for those things. That is a completely different business model. But if you have the customer and you're charging for that, which is the benefits that they're asking for from power, you have a more stickiness and a longer life period that you can have by selling just electrons. So that is an interesting thing to consider.
Thank you for your recommendation and your advice. It's highly appreciated. I would like to include you guys now. So I'm sure that there are many people in this room who have burning questions to our great panel. So who wants to put up a question for the panel? John from ESB, please.
Can you hear me? Okay, so the But key thing is, I think we're not afraid of, the churn rate in Ireland is 15%. We're happy to compete with other utilities. We're not worried about other utilities. We're worried about the other guys that move bigger, faster. And lessons from the telecom sector we mentioned earlier on. So they already have sort of customer segmentation of one, i.e. they watch each one of you guys' smartphones. They know if you're going to switch, they intervene with a deal. So build up to the grand question, do you think power utilities can get to, soon or not, customer segmentation of one, i.e. individual tailored offerings right down to individual householders? Is that a possibility? Is that something on the target? Is that an ambition? Thank you.
Who wants to take the camera?
I think it's way more than an ambition, absolutely. But I think if you're going to do that, you've got to be realistic about the tools that you need to get. I mean, Harry pointed out that you do need tools. You need a really sophisticated data analytics platform to help you understand that. You need a way of getting to those customers. And once you get to them, you need something more than just here's an electricity bill, or here's an electricity bill that's got a nice font, or here's a discount on that electricity bill. You really have to be understanding for them, once you have the segmentation, what does it mean to them? What can you do for them that taking that segmentation meets or delights their expectations, that at least probably drags you from where you have been to at least par with other industries in terms of what other industries are able to do, what a Netflix can do, as surface movies you like, and actually apply even that, and then beyond that, what other products and services can you do, knowing what they want, knowing who they are, knowing what might make their lives better. And so for us, it's certainly not some sort of distant ambition. It's very much in the crosshairs of what we're trying to do.
Sorry, I haven't seen it written down anywhere. I keep asking our own guys to put it in, even as a stretch goal. So, for example, you've got a guy living on the 12th story of an apartment block, and your great offer to retail is, well, let's sell you a solar panel and an EV, and he has a bicycle and no roof. So, because we don't know that's where he's living.
It's poor digital profiling.
Yeah, but when are we? Is that written into anybody's strategy in the utility space? Because I think this is one of the spaces where a data-driven business model, somebody's going to get there. Other people probably could do it in the morning, but they don't have too many electrons to sell yet. So, the question is this something we're going to use it or lose it? Is the question maybe? Thomas, you could answer. I don't know. I
mean, you are putting a big shortcoming of the moment into sharp relief. Is the term or the awareness of what is a customer is about to change and needs to change. We are trained in an industry of not serving customers, but serving meters, yeah? Sending electrons and molecules to meters. The notion of there is a customer, there's a person, and if he's for coincidence in this house where the meter hangs, or if he's on the road driving his hopefully electric vehicle, or he is consuming other services, or he is an element in a municipality which demands municipal services also. This notion of what is a customer and what does it mean for me is a feeling, or let's say an approach which is just about to emerge in our industry. Yeah? Let's face it. Yeah? And once we have made this mental transformation, we have to be there. Yeah, exactly. Then we have to. Then this, let's say, demand from the market, which you're just describing, has to be fulfilled.
Thank you. Talking about mental transformations, we have time for one last question. Is there anybody else who wants to ask something? Here we have the catch box.
Okay, hi, my name is Christoph. I'm from the Innovation Hub, and I'm responsible for one of our focus topics, cybersecurity. My question is about partnership, and you talked about partnership with startups, and partnership is for me actually value creation for both sides. And you talked about there are great startups out there that bring new technology, and at a certain point that this is something we can bring into the energy space. But what is, from your point of view, the value energy brings for the startup?
Who wants to take the question?
I will not take the question because he's my
Cameron.
Yeah, I can do it every performance dialogue.
You know the answer.
Was the question, what is the value of energy for the startup?
What is the value of an energy company that can bring it into the partnership with startups? So what we bring onto the...
I would like to hope that it's enormous. I mean, if you're a big energy company, the resources you can bring, the insight, the capital, the channels to market, the customers. I mean, we can take a company that is challenged to get into a market and say, here's 10,000 customers, let's test your product here, let's see what would work, let's help you get established, let's give you a test case, let's give you a some sort of reputation in the marketplace for doing something good, let's hone it, let's find it, and then if you make it succeed, we'll give you a purchase order for another 100,000 or million. So at least even simplistically in terms of just the channel partner, but beyond that, I think given the insight we have into our own market and what is successful, we can help shape the value proposition, we can help teach the people how to articulate that message to other energy companies. It's so much value you can bring, and that's the thing we do. We look very hard, but the companies we choose to, it's transformational, it changes them. It's not just the value creation in terms of the equity growth, but it's in terms of really making them see where the customer in this particular case and helping them to understand from a customer perspective what it is that makes their company successful.
Yeah, maybe one recommendation is you talk to the colleagues from Intertrust, because I think the partnership that we have is a case study for how to do it and also how to deliver strategic impact, also with some nice financial moments that we just currently had. Thank you very much. A great panel. Time is over. Thank you for coming.